Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. I know you use this video to fall asleep. If you enjoy our stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what city are you watching? I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, let's dive in. I needed the job. That's what I kept telling myself as I pulled into the empty parking lot of McDonald's at 10:47 p.m., 13 minutes before my first graveyard shift. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed like dying insects, casting harsh shadows across the red and yellow interior that looked more sickly than cheerful in the darkness. My manager, Derek, was a thin man in his 40s with hollow cheeks and eyes that never quite met mine. He'd hired me over the phone after a 30-second conversation, which should have been my first red flag. But student loans don't pay themselves, and this was the only place hiring for overnight shifts that fit around my class schedule. "You're the new kid," Derek said as I walked through the employee entrance. It wasn't a question. He was already pulling on his jacket, eager to leave. "Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once." He led me behind the counter, pointing to a handwritten list taped to the wall beside the fryer. The paper was yellowed and curled at the edges, like it had been there for years. "Night shift rules. Do not break. Never work alone in the kitchen after 2 a.m. If someone orders exactly 37 chicken nuggets, close the store immediately. Do not acknowledge the woman in the red coat who sits in booth 12. The ice cream machine breaks down every night at 3:17 a.m. Let it. If you hear children laughing in the playground after midnight, do not investigate." "What kind of rules are these?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Is this some kind of hazing thing?" Derek's expression didn't change. The last 3 people who didn't follow these rules quit in their first week. One of them was found 3 days later wandering Highway 34 with no memory of how he got there. He paused at the door. "There's only one other person working tonight, Marcus. He'll be here at midnight. Follow the rules, kid. They're not suggestions." The door chimed as he left, and suddenly I was alone in the too bright restaurant with its empty booths and the constant hum of refrigeration units. I tried to laugh off the unease creeping up my spine. Every workplace had its quirks, right? Maybe this was just Derek's way of keeping new employees on their toes. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I learned the register system, memorized where everything was stored, and served the occasional late-night customer. Mostly drunk college kids and tired shift workers. Normal people doing normal things. See? Nothing to worry about. Marcus arrived at midnight sharp. He was older than me, maybe mid-20s, with tired eyes and the kind of pale complexion that came from working nights for too long. He nodded when he saw me, but didn't seem interested in conversation. "You read the rules?" he asked as he tied on his apron. "Yeah, but they're not a joke." His voice was flat, final. "I've been here 2 years. Follow them exactly, or quit now and save yourself the trouble." I wanted to ask him what had happened to make him so serious, but something in his manner warned me off. Instead, I focused on learning the routine, taking orders from the drive-thru, cleaning tables, ordinary tasks in an ordinary place. It was around 1:30 a.m. when she first appeared. I was wiping down tables when movement in the corner of my eye made me look up. A woman sat in booth 12, the corner booth that had been empty moments before. She wore a red winter coat despite the warm October night, and her dark hair fell in curtains around her face. She sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, staring straight ahead. "Excuse me," I called out, walking toward her. "The dining room is actually closed for cleaning right now. I can help you at the counter if..." Marcus's hand clamped down on my shoulder with surprising strength. "Kitchen," he said quietly. "Now." He pulled me through the swinging doors, his grip tight enough to bruise. "What the hell?" "Rule 3, he hissed. "Do not acknowledge the woman in the red coat. That means you don't look at her, you don't talk to her, you don't go near booth 12. Do you understand?" I looked back through the small window in the kitchen door. The woman hadn't moved. She sat like a statue, and now that I was really looking, I realized something was wrong with the way the light fell around her. The fluorescence directly above her booth seemed dimmer, as if something was absorbing the illumination. "Who is she?" "I don't know," Marcus said, "but she's been coming here every night for the past 8 months. Always sits in booth 12, never orders anything, never moves, and the people who try to talk to her." He shook his head. "Just don't. Trust me." When I looked again, booth 12 was empty. "Where did she—" "She'll be back," Marcus said with grim certainty. "They always come back." The rest of the night passed in tense quiet. Marcus worked with mechanical efficiency, never explaining his cryptic comment about "they." I tried to focus on my tasks, but I kept glancing at booth 12, half expecting to see the woman in red materialize again. At 3:17 a.m. exactly, the ice cream machine gave a grinding shriek and died. Marcus didn't even look up from the fryer. "Rule 4, he said simply. "Shouldn't we try to fix it?" "No." His tone brooked no argument. "Just put up the out of order sign. It'll work again tomorrow night." I stared at the machine. It had been working fine an hour ago. I'd even served soft serve to a customer around 2:30. But now it sat silent and dark, like it had never worked at all. My shift ended at 6 a.m. without further incident, but I went home with a knot of unease in my stomach. I told myself it was just the weirdness of working nights, the disorientation of sleeping through the day. But I kept thinking about the woman in the red coat and the way the light had seemed to bend around her. The second night started the same way. Derek's brief instructions, the empty restaurant, the oppressive quiet broken only by machinery and the occasional customer. Marcus arrived at midnight with the same tired expression, the same reluctant acknowledgement of my presence. "Any questions about last night?" he asked. "What happens if someone orders 37 chicken nuggets?" He paused in tying his apron. "Hope you never find out." The woman in red appeared again at 1:47 a.m. This time, I was ready for her, watching booth 12 out of the corner of my eye. One moment it was empty, the next she was there, sitting in exactly the same position as before. But tonight I noticed something else. The temperature around booth 12 was noticeably colder. When customers walked past it to use the restroom, their breath misted slightly. I forced myself to look away and focus on my work. Rule 3. Do not acknowledge her. Around 2:30 a.m., a car pulled up to the drive-thru. The driver was a middle-aged man with bloodshot eyes and the jittery movements of someone who'd had too much caffeine. "Yeah, I need chicken nuggets," he said through the speaker. "How many?" There was a long pause. 37. My blood turned to ice water. I looked at Marcus, who had gone completely rigid at the fryer. "Sir?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "Could you repeat that order?" 37 chicken nuggets. Why, is that a problem?" Marcus was already moving, hitting buttons on the register, grabbing keys from under the counter. His face had gone white. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're closing due to a technical issue. Please drive around." "What? You can't just—" but Marcus had already switched off the open sign and was locking the front door. The customer in the drive-thru swore loudly and peeled out of the parking lot, but I barely heard him. My attention was fixed on booth 12. The woman in red was looking directly at us now. Her head had turned, and for the first time I could see her face clearly. Her skin was gray-white, like old paper, and her eyes were completely black, not just the pupils but the entire visible eye, like looking into deep water at night. When she opened her mouth, I saw that her teeth were too sharp and too numerous, row after row of them extending back into her throat. She smiled. "Back room," Marcus whispered. "Now. Don't look at her again." We retreated to the employee break room, a cramped space with a few plastic chairs and a broken vending machine. Marcus slumped into one of the chairs and put his head in his hands. "This is only the third time someone's ordered exactly 37 nuggets," he said. "The first time was about 6 months ago. Jerry, the guy who worked here before you, he thought it was just a coincidence, kept the store open." Marcus looked up at me and I saw genuine fear in his eyes. The customer came inside to eat, sat in booth 12 right across from the woman in red. They talked. I couldn't hear what they said, but Jerry could. He started screaming and ran into the kitchen. Found him the next morning sitting in the walk-in freezer, completely catatonic. He never spoke again. What about the second time? Last month, the new kid, Sarah, I think her name was. Same thing happened, but she followed the rule and closed the store. Good thing too, because when I came back the next morning to check on things..." He trailed off, shaking his head. Every table and chair in the dining room had been arranged in a perfect circle around booth 12. The security cameras showed them moving by themselves, sliding across the floor like they weighed nothing. And booth 12, it was covered in frost so thick you couldn't see through it. I felt sick. Why didn't you quit? Why doesn't everyone just quit? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think I haven't tried?" I put in my 2 weeks' notice 8 times. But every morning, Derek calls me and tells me there's been a scheduling issue and asks if I can work just one more shift. When I say no, things start happening. My car breaks down. My rent check gets lost in the mail. My girlfriend dumps me for no reason she can explain. He met my eyes. "You can't leave once you've seen too much. They won't let you." We waited in that break room for 2 hours, listening to silence from the dining area. No footsteps, no voices, no sound at all except the hum of refrigeration units. Finally, as dawn began to lighten the windows, Marcus deemed it safe to venture out. The dining room looked normal. Booth 12 was empty, the chairs and tables in their proper places. The only sign that anything unusual had happened was a thin layer of frost on the floor around booth 12, already melting in the morning warmth. "Clean that up before Derek gets here," Marcus said quietly, "and don't mention any of this in your report." I was exhausted by the time I got home, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face, the paper-white skin, the endless rows of teeth, the black eyes that seemed to look right through me to something behind my soul. The third night, I almost called in sick. But student loans, remember? And besides, what could I tell Derek? "Sorry, can't come in because a supernatural entity with too many teeth might be haunting booth 12. He'd fire me on the spot. So I went in, hoped for a quiet night, and tried not to think about 37 chicken nuggets. The woman in red appeared at 1:23 a.m., earlier than usual. I kept my eyes fixed on the register, wiping down surfaces that were already clean, doing anything to avoid looking at booth 12. but I could feel her presence like a cold weight in the corner of my vision. Around 2:15 a.m., I heard something that made my blood freeze. Children's laughter. It was coming from the playground outside, high, delighted giggles that would have been perfectly normal during the day. But this was the middle of the night, and the playground had been empty when I'd looked out an hour ago. Marcus was in the walk-in freezer getting supplies for the morning shift. I was alone with the sound of invisible children playing in the darkness outside. Rule 5. If you hear children laughing in the playground after midnight, do not investigate. But the laughter was so innocent, so joyful. What if there really were kids out there? What if they were lost or hurt or... The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a different sound. Scratching, like fingernails on glass. I looked toward the windows facing the playground. The glass was fogging up despite the warm night, and shapes were appearing in the condensation. Letters spelled out by invisible fingers. Come play with us. My rational mind screamed that this wasn't real, that I was hallucinating from stress and sleep deprivation. But then I heard my name being called from outside, spoken in a child's voice that somehow managed to sound both sweet and wrong at the same time. Jamie, come outside. We want to show you something." I took a step toward the window before catching myself. Rule 5. Do not investigate. But the voice was so compelling, so insistent. It tugged at something deep in my chest, a longing I couldn't quite identify. When had I last played? When had I last felt the simple joy of childhood games? Jamie, don't you want to play with us? It's so much fun out here. So much better than being inside with her. Her? I glanced toward booth 12 despite myself. The woman in red was staring directly at me now, and her smile had widened. Too wide. The edges of her mouth extended almost to her ears, and I could see every one of those needle-sharp teeth. The children's voices grew more urgent. She's going to hurt you, Jamie. Come outside where it's safe. Come play with us. Come play forever. I was halfway to the door when Marcus emerged from the freezer. Stop, he shouted, dropping an armload of burger patties. They scattered across the floor as he grabbed my arm. Don't listen to them. But they're just kids, I said, though even as I spoke, I realized how strange my voice sounded. Dreamy, distant. They want me to play with them. They're not kids. Marcus pulled me away from the door, his grip painful on my arm. Look at the playground. Really look. I pressed my face to the window, cupping my hands around my eyes to block the reflection. The playground equipment was there. Swings, slides, climbing structures painted in primary colors. But something was wrong with the proportions. The swings hung too low, as if designed for children much smaller than any human child. The slide twisted in ways that hurt to look at, defying geometry, and covering everything, like a spider's web made of shadow, were dark tendrils that writhed and pulsed with their own rhythm. What is that? I whispered. I don't know, Marcus said, but 3 months ago, a customer's kid ran out there while his dad was ordering. We found the boy 20 minutes later, still sitting on the swings. But he was different, colder. He kept talking about his new friends and how they were teaching him better games. His father took him to doctors, psychologists, everyone. Kid seemed normal during the day, but every night he'd try to sneak back here. Had to move out of state to break whatever hold this place had on him. The children's voices had faded, but I could still see shapes moving in the playground. Small forms that didn't quite look right, playing games that didn't quite make sense. Why? I asked. Why is this happening? What does this place want? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, still watching the playground. "I think," he said finally, "that this McDonald's was built on something that should have been left alone. And now it's collecting. Customers, employees, anyone who stays too long or sees too much, the woman in red, the voices outside, even the ice cream machine, they're all part of it. Then why do we stay? Why don't we just leave town? Because once you've seen them, they don't let you go," Marcus said quietly. "You can try to leave, but something always pulls you back. A job opportunity that's too good to pass up. A relationship that ties you to the area. Car trouble at just the wrong moment. I've watched it happen to a dozen people over the past 2 years." We spent the rest of the night in tense silence, both of us avoiding booth 12 and the windows facing the playground. The woman in red remained until just before dawn, her black eyes tracking our movements. The children's laughter had stopped, but occasionally I caught glimpses of small shapes pressed against the glass, their handprints leaving strange smears that didn't look quite like anything human hands would make. By the fourth night, I was barely sleeping. The few hours of rest I managed were filled with dreams of endless rows of teeth and children's voices calling my name. I'd started seeing the woman in red in places she shouldn't be, reflected in my bathroom mirror, sitting in the back seat of my car, standing at the foot of my bed when I woke up screaming at 3 a.m. I was coming apart, and I knew it. But I went to work anyway, because what choice did I have? Marcus met me at the employee entrance with the same tired expression, but tonight there was something else in his eyes. Fear, but also a kind of grim determination. "Tonight's different," he said as we clocked in. "I can feel it. Whatever this place wants, I think it's getting ready to make its move." "What do you mean?" "Look around. Really look." I did, and immediately saw what he meant. The restaurant felt different, more oppressive, like the air itself was thicker. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting shifting shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. The temperature was noticeably cooler, and I could see my breath when I spoke. "It's getting stronger," Marcus said. "Every person who breaks the rules, every night we work here, we're feeding it somehow, and I think it's almost full." The woman in red appeared at 12:47 a.m., earlier than she'd ever shown up before. But tonight, she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her in booth 12 was a man I didn't recognize, middle-aged, wearing a McDonald's uniform from what looked like the 1980s based on the style. His skin had the same paper-white pallor as the woman's, and when he turned to look at us, I saw the same black eyes, the same too-wide smile full of sharp teeth. "That's Jerry," Marcus whispered. "The guy I told you about, who went catatonic. He never left. He's been here all along." More figures began to appear throughout the dining room. A teenage girl in a McDonald's visor, sitting alone at a corner table. A small boy in the playground area, visible through the windows, swinging on the impossible swings that hung too low. An elderly man by the counter, wearing clothes that looked decades out of date. "How many?" I asked. "I count 6, Marcus said, "but there are probably more we can't see yet." As if summoned by his words, more shapes began to materialize. Translucent at first, like heat mirages, then gradually solidifying. Customers, employees, children, all with the same pale skin, black eyes, and predatory smiles. They filled every booth, every table, crowding the dining room until it looked like the busiest McDonald's in history. Except they were all completely silent. "We need to leave," I said, backing toward the employee entrance. "Right now." But when I tried the door, it wouldn't budge. The handle turned, but the door itself seemed to be held shut by some invisible force. "They're not going to let us go," Marcus said with resigned certainty. "Not tonight." The figure of Jerry stood up from booth 12 and began walking toward the counter. The woman in red followed, and then the others, moving with the synchronized precision of a well-rehearsed dance. They formed a semicircle around us, trapping us behind the counter with our backs to the kitchen. Jerry spoke first, his voice carrying despite the fact that his lips didn't move. "You've seen too much, both of you. It's time to join us." "We followed the rules," I said desperately. "We did everything right." The woman in red tilted her head, and when she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The rules were never meant to protect you. They were meant to prepare you, to make you ready for this moment." Understanding hit me like a physical blow. The rules weren't safety measures, they were a screening process, a way to identify which employees were observant enough, brave enough, or stupid enough to survive long enough to see the truth. Everyone else quit early or had their memories erased somehow, but those who stayed, who followed the rules and endured night after night of supernatural encounters, were being evaluated for something else entirely. "You want us to join you," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "We need workers," Jerry said with that terrible smile. "The night shift never ends here, and we've been watching you both. You're perfect candidates. What happens if we refuse?" The woman in red's smile widened impossibly further. "Look around. Do you see anyone who refused?" All the pale figures in the dining room turned to stare at us, their black eyes reflecting the flickering fluorescent lights. Men, women, teenagers, children, all former employees or customers who had gotten too close to whatever had claimed this place. "There is another option," a small voice piped up from near the playground windows. It was the boy on the swings, who looked no older than 8 or 9. "You could play with us instead. It's much more fun." "Don't listen to him," Marcus warned. "That's how they got Kevin, the customer's kid I told you about. The children's area is just another trap." The boy's face scrunched up in disappointment. "You're no fun. Just like all the grown-ups, you never want to play the good games." "What are the good games?" I found myself asking, though I immediately regretted it. The boy's expression brightened. "Hide and seek, but you hide forever. Tag, but once you're it, you stay it. Red light, green light, but when the music stops, you stop forever." He giggled, and the sound made my skin crawl. "And the best game of all, follow the leader. Want to know who the leader is?" He pointed at the woman in red, who was now standing directly in front of the counter. Up close, I could see that her coat wasn't actually red fabric. It was covered in dark stains that might have been blood, or might have been something worse. "Choose," she said, "adult work or children's play. But you cannot leave." I looked at Marcus, hoping to see some sign of a plan, some indication that he had an escape route I hadn't thought of. But his face showed only defeat and resignation. That's when I remembered something Derek had said on my first night, something I'd dismissed as the ramblings of a weird manager. They're not suggestions. The rules. He hadn't been talking about workplace policies. He'd been talking about literal survival instructions. And there was one rule I hadn't seen tested yet. Rule 1. Never work alone in the kitchen after 2 a.m. I glanced at the clock. 2:03 a.m. "I need to check something in the walk-in freezer," I said loudly, backing toward the kitchen doors. "Stay where you are," the woman in red commanded, but I was already pushing through the swinging doors. "Marcus," I shouted. "Kitchen, now." He understood immediately, diving through the doors just as the assembled figures began moving toward us. The kitchen felt different from the dining room, warmer, brighter, more real somehow. The supernatural cold that had been building all night seemed to stop at the kitchen doors. "Rule 1, Marcus breathed. "Never work alone in the kitchen after 2 a.m. It's not about being alone, I realized. It's about the kitchen itself. This is the one place they can't fully enter. Through the small windows in the kitchen doors, we could see the pale figures crowding against the barrier, their faces pressed to the glass. But they weren't coming through. They couldn't. "Why?" Marcus asked. I thought about it, looking around the kitchen with its stainless steel surfaces, industrial equipment, and bright work lights. Maybe because this is the only part of the restaurant that's still purely functional. Just about making food, serving customers. It hasn't been corrupted yet. But we can't stay here forever. He was right. Already I could see changes beginning in the kitchen. The lights were starting to flicker, the temperature was dropping, and frost was forming on the windows of the walk-in freezer. Whatever protected this space was weakening. "There has to be another way out," I said, looking around desperately. "The delivery entrance, the roof access, something." "The delivery door's locked from the outside after hours," Marcus said, "and the roof access is in the dining room." I was about to reply when I heard a familiar sound, the grinding shriek of the ice cream machine dying. But it was only 2:17 a.m. According to the rules, it shouldn't break down until 3:17. "The rules are changing," Marcus said with growing panic. "Whatever's happening, it's accelerating." The lights in the kitchen flickered more rapidly, and the temperature continued to drop. I could see my breath now, and ice was beginning to form on the surfaces around us. The protective barrier was failing. "Listen," I said urgently. "When I first got here, Derek said the last 3 people who didn't follow the rules quit in their first week. One was found wandering Highway 34 with no memory. Yeah, so he got out. Somehow he escaped and made it to the highway, which means there is a way. But he lost his memory. Maybe that's the price. You can leave, but you forget everything." Through the kitchen windows, I could see the pale figures spreading throughout the dining room, searching for another way to reach us. The woman in red stood directly in front of the doors, her black eyes fixed on mine. She raised one hand and pressed it against the glass, and where her palm touched, the window began to crack. "We're out of time," Marcus said. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. In the corner of the kitchen, partially hidden behind a rack of cleaning supplies, was a small door marked Utility. I'd assumed it was just a closet, but now I could see a thin line of light underneath it. "There," I pointed. "That door. That just leads to the utility room. There's no exit." "How do you know? Have you ever actually been in there?" Marcus paused. "No, but then we're going to find out." The kitchen windows finally gave way with a sound like breaking ice. The woman in red stepped through, followed by Jerry and the others. The temperature plummeted and the lights went out completely. In the darkness, I grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him toward the utility door. It was unlocked, opening into a narrow space filled with water heaters, electrical panels, and cleaning equipment. But at the far end, barely visible in the dim light from a small window, was another door. Behind us, I could hear the pale figures entering the kitchen, their footsteps echoing strangely in the confined space. The woman in red called out, "You cannot hide from us. This place is ours now." The second door opened onto a narrow alley behind the strip mall. Cool night air hit my face, carrying the scent of garbage and car exhaust. Normal smells that seemed impossibly precious after the sterile, supernatural atmosphere of the restaurant. "Run," I said. We sprinted across the parking lot toward my car, keys already in my hand. Behind us, the McDonald's was blazing with light, every window illuminated. But the light was wrong. Too bright, too white, like looking into the heart of a fluorescent bulb. And silhouetted against that harsh illumination, I could see dozens of figures pressed against the windows, watching us flee. I gunned the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, not caring about speed limits or traffic laws. In the rearview mirror, the McDonald's grew smaller and smaller, but the unnatural light continued to pour from its windows like a beacon. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked. "Highway 34, I said, "where Derek said they found that other guy." We drove in silence through the empty suburban streets, past darkened houses and closed businesses. It wasn't until we reached the highway that either of us spoke again. "Do you think we're free?" Marcus asked. I considered the question as we merged onto the interstate. The McDonald's was no longer visible behind us, but I could still feel its pull, a subtle tugging sensation, like a fishhook embedded in my chest. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but we're alive, and we're not trapped in there with them. That's something." We drove until dawn, taking random exits and switching highways several times. By the time the sun came up, we were 3 states away, sitting in a diner that served actual food made by actual human beings. "What now?" Marcus asked over coffee and eggs that tasted like the most delicious meal I'd ever eaten. "Now we try to build normal lives," I said. "Find jobs that don't involve supernatural entities or impossible rules. Maybe go back to school, meet people, fall in love, all the regular human stuff." "You think we can?" I looked out the diner window at the sunrise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. After the harsh, fluorescent lighting of the McDonald's, natural light seemed like a miracle. "We have to try," I said. That was 6 months ago. I never did go back to finish college. Every time I thought about returning to campus, I'd remember the McDonald's and lose my nerve. Instead, Marcus and I ended up in a small coastal town in Oregon, working at a family-owned restaurant that serves organic food and closes at 9 p.m. sharp. We don't talk about that night very often. There's an unspoken agreement between us that some experiences are too heavy to carry in conversation. But sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I find myself thinking about the woman in red and all those pale figures trapped in their eternal night shift. I wonder if they're still there, serving impossible customers and following rules that make no sense. I wonder if Derek knew what he was feeding us to, or if he was just another victim following orders he didn't understand. And sometimes, when I pass a McDonald's during the day and see normal people eating normal food under normal lighting, I wonder if I should warn them about working the graveyard shift. But what would I say? Don't take the night job because you might encounter supernatural entities? They'd think I was crazy. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe the whole thing was just a stress-induced hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. Maybe the woman in red was just a confused customer, and the children's voices were just the wind, and the pale figures were just my imagination. But then I remember Rule 3, the one that saved my life. Do not acknowledge the woman in the red coat who sits in booth 12. I never did acknowledge her directly. Even when she was staring right at me with those black eyes and that impossible smile, I never spoke to her or approached her table. I followed Rule 3 to the letter, and maybe that's what gave me the strength to resist her final offer. Or maybe it just delayed the inevitable. Because sometimes, when I'm working late at the Oregon restaurant, I catch a glimpse of red fabric in my peripheral vision. And sometimes, when I'm walking home after closing, I hear children's laughter coming from empty playgrounds. The rules may have saved my life that night, but I'm starting to think some games never really end. They just change venues. I don't work night shifts anymore, and I never, ever eat at McDonald's. But I keep the rules written on a piece of paper in my wallet, just in case. Because you never know when you might need them again. Never work alone in the kitchen after 2 a.m. If someone orders exactly 37 chicken nuggets, close the store immediately. Do not acknowledge the woman in the red coat who sits in booth 12. The ice cream machine breaks down every night at 3:17 a.m. Let it. If you hear children laughing in the playground after midnight, do not investigate, follow them exactly. They're not suggestions. They might just save your life too.